welcome to the Nature Garden podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the Weekending Show team from Lionheart Radio. Thanks for joining us on a canny wee wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees, and it's a chance to hear some great stories from the past and present. In this episode, a little bit of wintertime reflection and a chance to look ahead as January begins, bringing time, hopefully, after the festive celebrations to think about adventures, plans and dreams. We bring you some thoughts on the year ahead and the one gone from the two Toms, Tom Cadwallender and Tom Pattinson, plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P, all coming up on the Nature Garden podcast. January has a lot to offer as the new year starts. It's a time to reboot, to take stock and consider alternatives. We might want to plan new things we'd like to do or see, to grow something or go somewhere different, or just lie low and enjoy the quiet. Here's Tom Pattinson with some thoughts on the gardening year.
It's early January and the beginning of a new calendar gardening year. The growing season will come later, but we're all so keen to get things going. I'm doing some jobs out in the garden at the moment, but the big problem is for anyone thinking about sowing seed outdoors in the soil, it's not far from warm enough. It's -1 Celsius during the day around here, North Northumberland, but it has been up on occasions to +5, +6 Celsius. Whoopsie-doo. Wow, positively Mediterranean, not warm enough to encourage germination of seeds in the soil. They need something around 10 Celsius, 8 to 10, at least to think about germination, but a good temperature band for getting them going is between 12 to 15 Celsius. So, keep your seeds packets closed at the moment. If you want to sow anything at all, then do so in the garden room or the conservatory, say. Get it germinated. I do this at the end of January, by the way, the end of this month. Germination takes anything between 3 to 4 days, way up to about a fortnight. You should see the seedlings, if they're going to germinate at all, popping up within a fortnight. So that would take us into the second week in February. Give them a couple of days, a couple of weeks growing on in the conservatory or garden room in good light. And here's the thing, it's no good just germinating seeds. You've got to have a follow-up. Granted, you have a slightly lower temperature for them growing on after germination, but you must have good light intensity, otherwise they become leggy, get far too long and spindly, not enough sturdy enough growth. So what do? If I've done that, started them off in the garden room, when they get into about near the end of February, there's a bit of solar warmth, greenhouse effect in the unheated greenhouse. So during the day, it's good enough to accept broad beans and garden peas. I start those off early. I start most of my vegetables off in pots. So I can plant them out outside in May and hit the ground running rather than just sowing into the Easter soil. When there's a bit of warmth, of course, but I prefer it this way. So if you have an unheated greenhouse, sometime by the end of February, you can get away with putting some of your seedlings or vegetable seedlings into that and have some fleece, of course, standing by, protect the fleece for if the temperature does drop severely during the evening. So broad beans, peas and shallots, I put those in pots as well. The onion family, they're strong enough to stand up to it and tough it out. If you haven't these facilities, I'm assuming you don't have a heated greenhouse because that's expensive these days. If you haven't the facility of a garden room, conservatory, warm room in the house, or the secondary facility of the cold greenhouse to harden them off as they come through, then don't deprive yourself. There's no need of depriving yourself of sowing seeds, because think about salad crops indoors. They can grow from seed. Get a seed tray, put some peat-free compost in, and sow some garden peas, for example, or lettuce. Garden peas, pea shoots, they'll germinate in a warm room in the house, and they can stay in there, and you can get the scissors to chop off the tops, and they keep on coming again, cut and come again. So that's one possibility. Another that I like to do is sowing bean sprouts. That's mung beans, azuki beans, fenugreek, things of that nature. I've got a jar, large jar, with a lid on. I put them into there, put a handful into the jar, and I put some muslin or some material over the neck of the jar and fix it in place with a rubber band. And then I fill the jar up with water and let it stand for about half an hour, so that the seeds are soaking, and then drain the water off and put it into the airing cupboard, which is quite warm and dark. And within 3 or 4 days, I guarantee you'll have some bean sprouts, bean shoots, to put in a stir fry, salad, eat them raw, whichever. And it's lovely to be able to sow something like that and get a quick return. And that compensates for not getting out into that garden and sowing seeds at the moment.
From little acorns, mighty oak trees grow, and Tom Pattinson is adopting that bit of Geoffrey Chaucer wisdom and planning some things to begin in January and February.
When you finally get down to seed sowing in the unheated greenhouse, when there's enough warmth, or outdoors when the soil is warm enough, make sure that you have read that information on the packet. There's so much of it, what you should be doing to get a successful germination. Check the sow-by date, because generally speaking, they allow 2 or 3 years for vegetables ahead and for flowers. So 2024 seed packet, they'll be saying sow by 2027, something of that nature. But it's generally, you can go way beyond that. There have been recorded instances of people finding vegetables, cabbage for instance, in a packet of seed unopened at 25 years after it was bought, and they've still germinated. Granted, beyond the sell-by date, it's possible not to have 100% germination. But gosh, if you're getting 80% germination, say, how many cabbages do you want? So that's one of the possibilities. So make sure also you've given the temperature, which states on the packet of the seed you're going to sow, within its temperature band range. Probably generally they say 12 to 15 Celsius, but quite often they'll say 15 to 20 Celsius, or in rare occasions above 20 Celsius, constant temperature until germination takes place. And then, of course, as with most seeds, you lower the temperature slightly afterwards to let it get into a normal growing mode with that daylight I mentioned earlier. Most seeds need to be covered up, but don't smother them completely, or you won't get a decent germination, if germination at all. And of course, others prefer to be on the surface. They need light. Believe it or not, most of the seeds, we grow them on in the dark and then get them out to germinate in the dark and then get them out into the light gradually. But the impatiens, or busy Lizzie, a common name, it needs daylight. So do begonias. So if you're sowing those, you sow them on the surface of the compost, and they come up that way. If you buried them, I'm afraid you wouldn't get much satisfaction with germination there on the surface for those. Some seeds also, if you fail to give them water naturally, follow up with water if it's necessary, they won't germinate without water or with too much water, and the temperature being too low, that will just rot off. And the big one is germination inhibitors, sort of a dormancy in seeds. You have to break the dormancy before they will germinate. Some plants, say the cyclamen, which I grow outdoors, the hardy cyclamen, the viability of their seeds, it's not too long at all, sown within weeks. And also the primula family, Himalayan primula, after weeks, the seeds won't germinate because you've missed it's a short viability they have. On the other end of the scale, of course, you have the poppies. They may have been buried, the seeds, for years, hundreds of years, up to 1,000 and beyond, I suppose, and they'll still germinate. So are these things to bear in mind. The inhibitors, which stop dormancy, a typical example is sweet peas. Hard seed coat there. Gardeners generally, rather than waiting for ages for them to be moist enough to break the test of the seed coat and let the water in and let them germinate, they will chip away with a knife, cut a notch into the seed coat to let water in. Also, quite often they're soaked as well, soaked completely, saturated, so they begin to swell and the water gets in, but of course too long in the water and they'll rot off anyway, so you've got to be smart with that one. The one I like is the tree peony. Peonies generally, I guess. It has beautiful cherry-sized, almost mahogany dark brown berries, fruits inside the case, the capsule. And we sowed some about maybe 5-6 years ago now, and I realised that the inhibitor there was it needed natural cold winter period, and then warmth to break that dormancy so it would germinate for us. But tree peony needed a double dormancy, a double dose of that. So it took 2 years to germinate them. So we had them out in the cold and then in the warmth. And the first germination gave us the roots, which came down through the bottom of the pot the seeds were sown in. And the second germination, after cold and warmth again, give us the shoot. So make sure you find out something about the seeds, but generally run-of-the-mill seeds, they germinate within a fortnight and no great problem. I hope that's helpful. Carl, I think it's time to get that kettle on for tea.
This is the Nature Garden Podcast with Carl Steinson, Tom Pattinson, Tom Cadwallender and Steve Lowe.
Now, in the world of birds, there have been quite a few surprises this year in our gardens and fields and along the shoreline. Here's Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology with some highlights from the year gone and with his thoughts on the seasons ahead.
Since the early 1970s, I've been recording my bird sightings in a diary journal. Hey, journal sounds very kind of upmarket, kind of highfalutin, but actually really is just me recording my birds. I use an A5 page a day diary, and I've used those for, as I say, from the 1970s, early 1970s. So I've got over 50 of these things. And you kind of wonder why you do it. And I know when I do it, it's at first it was just a habit, but now I kind of use those diaries, those journals, as a kind of a reflection point. I'll go back and just look at, see what things were like back in those particular times and on that particular day over a number of years. And I've got that kind of long-term perspective, which actually is really very, very helpful. And at this time of year, we're kind of reflecting upon what's gone on in the last year, in 2023, and it's been quite an interesting year for a number of reasons. And it's had its ups and it's had its downs, and on a personal level, yes, it's been up and down, and on a kind of ornithological level, internationally, it's been up and down as well. But I'll just kind of start with the idea that on a personal level, I hadn't travelled, and I love travelling. I hadn't travelled really abroad since the COVID years, basically. And the beginning of the year was quite interesting. In January, I got a chance to go to Colombia. I love South America and South and Central America. I spent a lot of time there over the last 15 odd years. Apart from the last couple of years, of course. And so I got a chance to go to Colombia, and I've never been to Colombia before. And Colombia is one of the best places in the world, best country in the world for bird watching, for the number of species potentially to be seen. Absolutely fantastic, really. So I got a chance to do that. And in March time, Muriel and I got a chance to go to Costa Rica. And Costa Rica is just an amazing place. So kind of those two big trips really reinvigorated my kind of thoughts about international travel. But, I'm having to temper that enthusiasm for international travel by the whole kind of thought about the planet, basically. And I'm really sort of thinking quite hard about that sort of thing. But yeah, so those were kind of two big highlights early on in the year in terms of the of travelling and seeing birds. And I saw loads of birds, exotic species, which were absolutely fantastic, great places to go. And kind of on a personal level, at the beginning of the year, it was quite interesting too, because I was involved in two television programs recorded last year in 2022, that is. But one was working with Robson Green on his weekend breaks, and I took Robson out bird watching up in Rothbury, and that was broadcast in January. But one of the most interesting things I got to do was to work with Jim Moyer, who used to be Vic Reeves. Jim and his wife Nancy, they was part of their television series for Sky Arts. Jim and Nancy paints birds, and he wanted to paint curlews in Northumberland, and they found me, and I acted as the guide for Jim and Nancy. And we had a fabulous couple of days filming and chatting about birds, and he even gave me a picture, which was quite something. I was quite thrilled by that. And that was broadcast in April. So I've had really quite a good old time. And one of the major sort of media highlights is getting back into the studio with my good pals Carl, of course, and Tom Pat, the demon gardener of Lesbury, and Steve Lowe. We're back in the studio just before Christmas, and that was a great, fantastic delight to have, and I enjoyed it immensely. But I'm reflecting upon some of the birds that are around in the area, and we talk about pressures on the planet. There's quite major ones. We've lost a number of bird species breeding in the UK over the years, but I was just reading a report about from 2023 about how we've lost 23 species of birds as on the planet. They've gone extinct, and these birds are almost entirely from Hawaii, and one other was from another of the Pacific Islands. So these birds have gone extinct, largely through habitat destruction, just removal, and it's just been kind of crazy, basically. But that's one of the biggest issues that we have on the planet, habitat destruction, and it is at home as well. And there's all sorts of things going on which have made me very sad, like the kind of the diminishing of the kind of environmental laws that protect our landscapes and so forth. There's been some good points made, but actually there's a lot of bad ones, which is really quite depressing. But anyway, that's enough of that. But yes, in terms of the pluses, on my local patch of the Allen Estuary and the environs, and you've heard me talk about that quite a lot over the years, we've had a couple of new breeding species, which is quite something. And you talk about habitat destruction, but we've had some habitat creation and an expansion, which is great. We've got some Phragmites reed beds, and we've had marsh harrier breeding on the estuary for the first time, which was so exciting. They've been prospecting over a number of years, but for the first time they raised 3 or 4 young, which is amazing. Marsh harriers are kind of big birds of prey, but they're quite interesting in how they will quarter the ground and they'll hunt. The females have got this little golden cap. They're largely brown, but the females have got this golden cap, and the males are kind of just golden generally, and they're really quite splendid. But they've been increasing as a breeding species in the county of Northumberland over the last few years, and we've finally got them here on the Allen Estuary, which is great. And there's a couple of ducks which have been prospecting for some time, and I finally confirmed shoveler breeding for the first time, which was incredible. Shovelers are very similar to mallard, but they've got long spatulate sort of bills, and they're quite specialised in their feeding. But the other big deal was the red-breasted merganser. Red-breasted merganser are an incredibly rare breeding bird in the country, never mind Northumberland and the estuary. But we found a brood on the river back in July, and there was a brood of 5 young. Fantastic, really. And they really kind of just made a bit of a difference. And that must be only the second breeding record of red-breasted merganser in Northumberland, which is quite staggering, really. I'm so pleased to see that, I can tell you. So that was a really big highlight. And there's been 1 or 2 other species have dropped in on the estuary, and I've been quite a buzz, even towards the back of the year, where we're getting waxwings dropping in, and they were great to see, sort of just flitting around some of the gardens and so forth. But in terms of Northumberland as a whole, we've seen 1 or 2 good species this year, but one in particular was quite tremendous, and that was a species found by Gary Woodburn up near Low Newton. That was back in towards the end of May, and that was a grey-headed lapwing. Now, grey-headed lapwings should be breeding in kind of the Far East, Japan and China, and the winter no closer than Thailand. So what on earth that bird's been doing here, I have no idea. But certainly that was a first record for the country, for the UK. And Gary did so well, and a lot of bird watchers got to see that bird. Absolutely tremendous, really wonderful, wonderful looking thing. And it was in good breeding plumage as well, which was fantastic. And you reflect upon kind of what's come and what's gone and all that sort of business. And you need a little bit of a little bit of a buzz to kind of carry you through. And I'm just now sort of thinking we've got a whole new kind of year to go. 2024 is going to be a brilliant year. I'm the eternal optimist, and I just love the idea. And bird watching has been my life, and I mentioned earlier that I've got these kind of journals that go back to the very early 1970s, so I can reflect upon my birding life and how birds have been so important to my life, both professionally and as an amateur, and I've led tours and I give talks and I've done all sorts of things, but I just like getting out and just going bird watching. And it's absolutely wonderful, and it's good for my brain. It's good for my health, because I do a lot of walking, and really that's what we should be doing more of. Just getting out there, enjoying the countryside, enjoying what's there, and live it. It's absolutely wonderful, and just open your eyes a little bit and just see the wonders of the natural world. And I tell you what, that will take you an awful long way in life and just make you feel so much better. It has with me anyway. And yes, that was my reflections on 2023 and before, and I'm thinking of 2024 and how wonderful it's going to be, and it is going to be wonderful. Trying to set aside the kind of the downsides of kind of stuff that's going on there, but just enjoy wildlife. Just get out there and love it, and it'll serve you well. Anyway, all the best for 2024, folks. Gan canny and enjoy your life. Bye.
And to the sound of War Blackbird, here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
So it's jobs for the week time, and I'm pruning the apples at the moment. I give them a summer prune at the beginning of August, all the side shoots, laterals, prune them back to about 30 centimetres, about a foot, to shorten them and start ripening the wood for this year we're in now. Now's the time for the definitive or second pruning, and this is the final one to set them up for fruiting this summer. I chop them back with the secateurs, just 3 plump buds on every lateral shoot from the main stem, and that does the trick. I'm also pruning the pear similarly with spur pruning. Won't touch the plum yet at the moment because it'll let silverleaf disease, debilitating disease, into the plant through the pruning cuts. So that's best done in the late spring of the year when there's some young fruits on, sadly, but that's when it's best done, if you need to prune the plum at all. I'm also looking at the soft fruits. We've pruned the red currant and black currant immediately after flowering, but left the gooseberry. Now we can reduce it and spur prune it, open up the centre of the plant to avoid mildew disease spreading over it next year, and finish off the pruning of those. Looking at the raspberry canes, the autumn raspberry canes, I chop them right down to ground level, and they'll start growing again shortly. And by the time autumn comes, they'll be up to my height and producing a crop of raspberries again. Strawberry beds, got to go over them. I use the garden clippers, the garden shears, to get rid of the old leaves, which are looking ragged at the moment, and smarten that up. Get the weeds out from between the rows and give it a slow release feed and a mulcho around them. That'll set the strawberries up for this coming June. Brilliant. Get that done. I'm also looking at the shoots of spring bulbs coming up through the ground at the moment. People worry about this and think, if it's frosty, will that affect them at all? No, because nature has equipped them with a system whereby they farm out the surface water deep into the cells. Otherwise, they'd just expand with frost and break the cells inside the leaf plants. And then they do this when there's frost coming, and then replace the water in the outer cells when the frost has gone. They survive no problem at all. So don't worry about them. I'm looking into the greenhouse for a couple of minutes to get out of the cold, and I still have the vines to prune and the peach. And they're straightforward. Again, it's spur pruning. The main branches, any laterals or side shoots coming from those, I've reduced them to about the 2, 3 or 4 bud stage. And that will set both of them up for fruit yet again next year. Aren't we lucky? I'd love to cut the lawns, but it's too wet at the moment. But mark my words, it wouldn't be the first time. We'll get to the end of January, early February. It'll be a sunny day, and I'll get out there and I'll cut the lawn. It won't affect the grass at all. It's fine. It'll just smarten the area up. I'm mulching the fruit trees, the ornamental beds, and the borders. That's done gradually. Also outstanding is the pruning of roses. Now, people prune their roses any time before Christmas and way up to April Fool's Day, beginning of April. I prefer to do it in the January period. So I've got to go over the roses now and prune them then put a slow-release fertiliser on the bed, and then the organic mulch over the top of that to seal it in, and that's good for the coming summer. The first flush of roses comes about the end of June in this area in North Northumberland. Look forward to that. I've got some forced bulbs, narcissus, paper white, multi blooms on the stem, and a strong fragrance, gorgeous. I force them each year in the cold greenhouse. Time to bring those bulbs. They've got the shoots with the buds on, the flowering buds. Time to bring them into the garden room. Modest heat, and see them flower. Brilliant. What else we got there? The hyacinths. Oh yes, the pink hyacinths. They're just starting to show the pink petals now, which it's lovely to see them unfurling. They're early. I've forced those as well. We've got 2 or 3 pots or bowls of those, and they're just brilliant. Finally, it's the birds. Entertainment from garden to garden, wall to wall, hedge to hedge. Feed the birds, give them water, and in return, just watch their antics. It's really lovely. You know you're doing well by them, and it's so satisfying. I feed them daily and make sure they've got good water supply. Wow, got through that. Whatever you're doing in future, enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to Gardener Tom Pattinson and birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology. And a muckle big thanks to Steve Lowe from the Cresswell Peel Tower and Northumberland Rivers Trust for all his marvellous reports this year, and also to John and Dean from the Alnwick Poison Garden for their Tales from the Hovel series. We're taking our usual winter break for just a few weeks, but we'll be back in March for more nature, gardening and heritage reports and views from Northumberland and beyond. Don't forget you can listen back to all of our previous programmes via the Nature Garden podcast. That's the Nature Garden podcast. I'm Carl Steinson. Thanks for listening and for all your support. And enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature. Bye for now.